Welcome to the Raising Mothers podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Kahn. I'm a wife, a mama to two, and a certified conscious parent coach practitioner. It is my mission to guide mothers in transforming the way they connect, communicate, and collaborate with their teen. Every week, I will be bringing you inspiring, empowering, and educational episodes that will give you the tools you need to consciously raise your teenager. All right, let's do this. Okay, you guys, I am so excited to have today's special guest on. Today's special guest is Mansi, and Mansi is a certified conscious parent coach with a background in communication and psychology. Her mission is to bring purpose back to parenting by helping her clients really make sense of their parenting struggles and turning those struggles into parenting successes. You guys are in for such a treat. So welcome, Mansi, to the Raising Mothers podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashley. This is such a fun perk to be able to have a conversation with you in this way and to dive into some really wonderful topics. I'm
so excited too. Okay, so just a little bit of background. Mansi and I know each other because we both graduated from Dr. Shafali's Conscious Parenting Institute. And so through that, we actually met in the elevator at the conference. Now that I think about it, that's like when we first met,
Yes.
Which was awesome. So we connected there, exchanged each other's Instas. And then through one of our alumni calls, we connected again. So she's such a light, you guys. She is so wise and knowledgeable. And I'm so honored to have her on here today and to be able to share her with you.
No, I love that. And I want to echo the elevator story because, when you're just called to certain people and you just happen to catch their light and you're drawn to them. Well, Ashley is most definitely one of those people because we did meet in that elevator and her light just caught my eye. And I was like, we have to stay in touch. And we hadn't even known each other. We had never met each other. And I'm so glad that we did because that's turned into quite the fruition of a nice, peership in our work together and friendship. So I'm
You're
so
so
glad.
sweet. Absolutely. I know it's so crazy and kind of puts you at peace as you go through life, knowing like who's meant to come onto your path and be in relationship with. Like it naturally happens. Sometimes we force things so much, but when we just show up as ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Just energetically you connect with the people that are meant to be in your life. So right back at you, girl. Okay, so just so our Raising Mothers listeners kind of get to connect and know you a little bit more, I would love if you would share with us a little bit about your motherhood journey. Can't even talk today. Motherhood journey up until this point, and how you became a coach. What led you to becoming a coach?
I love that question because I myself never would have dreamt that I would be doing something like this, but always craved to be able to do something like this. I was gifted with being pregnant my first go around with twins. Did not even know that twins ran in my family until we announced it to the family. And lo and behold, we do have a history of twins, and had the beautiful blessing of having two babies at once. But having those two babies at once, it really shook me in my motherhood journey from the minute that I had them and brought them home and they were preemies to they were in the thick of their toddlerhood years, like around 2, 3, where I just felt like I couldn't get a grasp of what motherhood would feel like for me. My husband was in residency and fellowship at the time, so he worked close to 80 hours a week and was often not around. So when talking about motherhood, it was really just me and my kids. And that was really daunting because I couldn't tell if I was doing it right, as if there's such a thing. But having said that, in all of my questioning, in all of the triggers that would come up, whether in the raising of our children, whether it's the way that they're behaving, the tantruming, and we know that toddlers are known for their tantrums, and not knowing how to regulate that for myself, let alone my own children, I started to ask myself a lot of questions. I think the questions started to get louder than the other voices in my head that were a little bit more on the negative side of when are they ever going to stop doing this, or when can I find peace in this? And the questions got louder than those other voices. And as I began to question, I started to read more books. And in reading of the books, I felt like I found a lot of my answers. And as I found more and more of my answers, those voices that in my head that were questioning my entire integrity of what motherhood was were becoming quieter, were becoming more answered, more clear, and more clarified for me. Um, and then I went on to have a third. So now I have three children. I have 7-year-old twins, boy and girl, and I have a 3-year-old daughter. And the minute I got pregnant with her is kind of when that journey really began. And I began to read and just research so much that I couldn't help but live what it was that I was learning. And in that process, I read a fabulous book. If you haven't gotten your hands on it yet, if you haven't heard Ashley talk about Dr. Shefali yet, please get your hands on her books, any one of them. But for me, it was The Conscious Parent. And if anyone does pick up this book, the way that I read it, I found it to be super beneficial. But the first go around, I read it as if it was me that was the child. And then the second time around, I read it as the parent. And that's what really honed in this concept of conscious parenting and what it means to consciously raise our children as well as ourselves. And I knew that I wanted to go into something related to psychology ever since I was in college. I actually wanted to become a psychologist, and given the circumstances, took a different route in more business and marketing. But I found my way back. And I think just at the time when I was really seeking, and just like you said earlier, that just allow things to come to you, I had been searching and looking. And I think I just had allowed my energy to come and allow this to come to me. And at that time is when I found out that Dr. Shefali has a coaching institute. And, she was talking about how you can use this for your own personal gain, just in your own life. And I knew in that moment that I needed it for that reason, as well as to share with any others that might benefit, and have been a conscious parenting since graduating. And it could not be more gratifying work. And I know, Ashley, you can attest to this with your own work with your clients, that there isn't a more fulfilling path or purpose in life. And I'm just so grateful the moms that I've gotten the benefit to work with, and just the experiences and the learning that I continue to have for myself.
Oh,
So that's kind of how I got
I
there.
love that. That is such a beautiful story. And you just dropped so many golden nuggets in there that I know everybody could connect with. And the first one is, you mentioned you questioned yourself, am I doing this right? And all too often, every mother always asks the same thing, am I doing this right? Um, Part of it is because we're comparing ourselves to, at the time, what culture is doing. We're comparing ourselves to what other mothers are doing. And it isn't until like we really, really connect to ourselves, our true authentic self, that we, like you said, you had these voices and these questions in your head and they became so loud. But until we connect to ourselves, our true authentic selves, it seems, and let me know if this is true for you, but yes, those voices like totally quiet down and you don't question anymore, because you're exactly where you're meant to be, and you know that you have really everything within you to be able to parent the children that you were blessed with. I love how you brought that up, because I know for me, I also question, am I doing this like right? Am I doing this wrong? Am I totally screwing up my children? And then every season of motherhood, as your kids continue to get older, you find yourself in that same boat again. Am I doing this right? And so that's why, like, conscious parenting is really conscious living, because us too, as the parent, we're constantly evolving and becoming more and more of our true authentic self. And every season of childhood holds up a different mirror of different things that we, see within ourselves that is a gift, because we can heal and be able to show up more for ourselves and for our children. So thank you for sharing your authentic story with us, because there's so many things that we could connect to in your story.
No, and yeah, I love that. And even just you using that word authentic, I think it's such a journey to even understand what it means to get
Mm-hmm.
there. And it sounds like this blissful place that we just arrive at. But I think what really got me there was a lot of unlayering and a lot of shedding and a lot of deconstructing and almost like breaking down, not even just like actually like in our psyche, but emotionally in so many ways, kind of just our children are this huge invitation to just break down anything that's sheltering us, all these beliefs and all these ideologies that we have about life and parenting, and kind of shattering us, if you will, shattering that ego that has kept us safe for so long, and acknowledging that that ego no longer serves us in driving our life. and that there's something more. And like you mentioned, that authentic self that can now take the driver's seat. And it comes with the most gratifying, painful, rewarding feeling ever, because you are now sitting in that driver's seat and you are now dictating what you want your life to look like. You are the artist officially. And that is the most fulfilling feeling ever.
Absolutely. It takes you from this place of at once feeling hopeless to feeling hopeful because you're now empowered to be able to take the driver's seat. So, okay, I can't wait to get into more of this because you already are just dropping so many golden nuggets. Speaking of entering new seasons into motherhood constantly, right? As our children continue to get older, the teen years, and that's what this episode is going to be about. I'm going to kind of reflect a little bit about my teen years and what I felt, how I felt during the teen years, and really kind of we can deconstruct and process this together. And through that, there will be so much wisdom that we can share with the listener just about how us parents can show up for our teens in today's world. So, like I said, as I was reflecting on my teen years the other day, I was like, it's so funny because the teen years are like some of the best years, right? Like, was the high school years, junior high years a fun time for you?
It was relatively a fun time for
Yeah,
sure.
it's like how sometimes like what a season can be so fun on the outside, but for me, as I was reflecting on my inner world, which I never would have done as a teenager, right? Like you're just going through the motions in the teen years. But now being an adult and being, having the education that both you and I have had, I'm able to now look back as an observer. Like I was watching a movie of my teen years, and I was like blown away, but some of the awarenesses that I had. And one of that was like, if I am an observer in this movie of me as a teen, I was like, wow, she was really lonely and really lost. And it like made me really sad. But also, like I said, I have really great memories from it too. And the interesting part is observing on the outside, like if my adult self would have told my younger self and as a teen, like, wow, you like really lonely and lost, like I would have thought like, how could that be? Like she had so many friends, she was always going to parties, like she was always surrounded by so many people and doing so many things. But how can a teen girl who has that kind of environment feel so lonely and lost? But the lonely and lost really was coming from the inside. And really, as I break it down even more, it was because the three needs that every child and every human needs to have met is to be seen, to be heard, and to feel like they belong or are worthy. And these teen years are a huge, huge, or it's a huge, huge critical time for those things to be met because when you become a teenager, you're exploring like who you are. Where do I belong? You're asking, in motherhood, like you said, you had all these questions that keep getting louder. In the teen years, you have all these questions in your head that get louder and louder. And if there's no parent to guide you through or create this space for you to feel like you belong or to really see you for who you are and really to intentionally listen to you, you can feel lost and lonely. And this is not to say, anything bad about my parents. Like they did the best that they could and they were amazing parents, right? But we don't know what we don't know. And when we do know, then we can shift and do things a little bit differently. And so I really, in this episode, wanted to share how I felt in the teen years, but now knowing what we know, how you and I are shifting with a more awareness, mindfulness, and consciousness into our parenting as we move forward. So what do you think about like that? And like what I shared, just feeling lost and lonely and it being at the root, those three needs just not really being met. Have you ever felt that way or what comes up for you?
Yes, actually. In fact, when you said that I felt lost and lonely, the little teenage girl within me was like, I wish I could have found you so that we could have talked about
Mhm.
it. And then in that minute that I thought that, Ashley, because I totally resonate with that feeling that the outside seems like we're trying to figure out life, but the inside seems kind of like a
Mhm.
wreck. And reasonably so, like our prefrontal cortex has not even developed yet. Like we're working on it. Our hormones are changing and shifting on the inside. Our bodies are screaming and we don't even know
Yeah.
what our needs are. And that's exactly what I came to, was that had I known you, Ashley, in that moment, and I was able to come to you as a fellow teenage girl and say, hey, I get it. To some extent, I don't even know if I would have had the
Right.
language, or if you and I would have had the language to even communicate and conversate what it is that we're experiencing, which goes back to what you said, that all of our parents have done the best that they can. Absolutely. In fact, you and I are doing the
Yeah.
best that we can right now being conscious parenting coaches. However, there is so much more that we can learn, things that we can experiment with. So having said that, that goes the same for our parents. And I think that the conversations around
Mhm.
feelings was not exactly something that was
Right.
spoken about when we were younger in our generation, and the generations even beyond that. They never had that guidance. They may not have honestly ever been asked, how are you feeling? Such a simple question. But if that question isn't asked, if it's not explored, then how can a child understand what that even means? I'll be lying if I said it wasn't just until recently that I realized that I can decide how I feel, and the feeling doesn't have to dictate how my environment will be or how my experience will be. So, having said that, I totally resonate with what you said, and that it is absolutely a lonely feeling. And I can't remember where I read this, but I think it was just a recent study done in just a few years ago, that the one thing that the entire nation struggles with is this feeling of loneliness, and it came to be even more heightened during COVID. But absolutely, that is a feeling that not only resonating with us as teens, but just in
Mhm.
general. But being a teenager and feeling that lonely feeling, even being surrounded by people, by a community, by classmates, by friendships, by activities, there is a sense of feeling of loneliness within. And I think that it absolutely, some of it is just meant to be felt because it's a natural part of their teen experiences to feel all of the feelings. But it's also an experience that can be alleviated and that can be
Mhm.
comforted, not taken away, but comforted by an
Mhm.
adult. And I think that that's something that may not have been given to all of us as grown mothers now, but we are seeking to give to our children as mothers now.
Absolutely. That's so beautiful. And I love how you said, those feelings are meant to be felt, because when we allow ourselves to feel those feelings, it actually helps us discover more who we are. And if I think about that lonely feeling, and just being lost, it was really because I was so disconnected from myself and I had no idea who I was. And I was looking all at all the external places to tell me, like, give me answers, quiet these voices in my head of who I am and why I feel lost and all the lonely things, and just tell me who I am. Tell me that I'm loved. Show me that I belong. Um, and so as parents, really creating that environment for our teenagers to be able to feel safe and comfortable enough with us to just let it out if they need to let it out, and feel all of those feelings and to validate in them in that. Like, if me, thinking back, if my teenage self came to my mom and told her, like, I feel lonely, if she would have been like, why do you feel lonely? You have so many friends. You're never home. You're always doing things. Like, how could you feel lonely? Right. I think that's our initial reaction, because as a parent now, I would think like, oh, I want to fix that for my kid. I don't want her to feel lonely. So let me remind her of all the ways that I see why she shouldn't feel lonely. But if my mom, and I'm not saying she did this, but thinking back and replaying, if I would have come to her and said that, and she would have just said, tell me more, right? Like, there's just such
Mm.
like relief when you have an adult or a caregiver in your life who's just like, yeah, share more with me. I can see why you would feel that way. Tell me more. It really helps the child, the teen, to really navigate what it is that they're going through. But it always brings them back to who they are, and discovering more of their true authentic self so they don't feel lost.
You're so right. And you said something that was so key, that at that time, teens are discovering who they are. this is the phase of their life that they are supposed to. They're in training mode, like we're training for a
Mhm.
marathon. Our teens are training for who it is that they're going to be. They have already come knowing who it is that they are, but it's almost as if like they're still discovering what that's going to look like in this
Yeah.
lifetime. And in that discovery process, it's like a mad scientist in a lab. They're kind of like mixing and matching. Well, what if I respond to my parent like this? What's going to happen? What are the consequences if I experiment with X, Y, and Z? What if I don't do my homework? Or what if I try on this or I experiment with that? And they're trying to make sense of their experience. And that is really, really difficult. And I know that I focus more on like the toddler years, but I keep thinking back to toddlers are so young. And I keep reminding a lot of my clients that they've only been on this earth for 2 years, for 5 years. The world is still so vastly new for them that if we were to go to a new country, to explore a new city, by the end of that day of exploration, on our feet, seeing new things, hearing new languages, we would be drained and exhausted, completely drained. And that's us as fully functioning adults who have our consciousness, who have, are making good, healthy decisions on what we're going to fuel our bodies with, staying hydrated, all the good things. And this is now not just our toddlers, but here with our teens. They've only been on this earth for 5 years, or in this case, 13 or 15 years. That's really not that long a time. They're still so ex- exploratory in their nature. And that's very draining. So when we look at the inside of what's happening, it almost feels like discombobulating, which can make it really exhausting to be a teen, which then fuels more of that lonely feeling of, well, what is my experience? What was that experience when I saw those dancers dancing in that way in that other country? What was that experience when I saw this person doing this in school? Like they're making sense of their entire life in these short years. And the way that they make sense of the real world when their brains are fully developed and they're ready to participate in the world is so much shaped by how parents are able to hold space for them as they make sense of their world. Like you said, not make sense for them, but help support them as they make sense of it for themselves.
Yes, I love that because really so it's like the teen years are the new toddler years, right? Because in a sense, how you explained it, that was a beautiful analogy. Like the whole world is still to be explored. In the toddler years, the parent is really guiding and holding their hand, right, as they explore. Even like play dates. Like usually when you have play dates with in the toddler years, it's because the moms really connect and you're like, oh, let's get together. And then the kids play, right? But in the teen years, it's like no longer are you coordinating play dates. Like the teen is now like, who do I want to hang out with? And exploring the world, and they're taking initiative. And a lot of the times, parents feel, and I would have thought the same thing if I didn't go through the education that we had been to. The teen years is a time for them to like, spread their wings more and just like, okay, good luck, I'm here. But yeah, and yes, it is, to a certain degree that type of season, but really they need us to let go, but really lean in. So let them start making some of their decisions. Obviously, there's boundaries when I say that, like for physical safety and well being. But letting them explore with you there and helping them guide, really creating the environment that they know, like, if I need a place to fall back on and come to for safety, like my mom, my dad, my caregiver is there for me, because it is very emotionally draining to explore new friendships, school schedules, balancing homework load, managing practice, and finding time to do your homework to make sure everything gets done. It is a lot, and a lot, like I said earlier, usually we think like, okay, well, they'll figure it out. They're in their teens now. If they don't know by now, then, I haven't done my job as a parent, but really that's like the time to really help guide them, not fix things for them, but help guide them.
I love that you said that. In fact, I'm going to have to write this down. You said let go, but lean in. And that's such a fine nuance. And that if we can get that down
Yeah.
energetically, then I think that that feeds so much into a successful parenting journey, because you're absolutely right. In teenagers being able to discover their life, they have to be able to have room. They have to have room to be
Mm.
able to do that. There needs to be a sense of let go, like you can make mistakes. But there's also that fine nuance that you mentioned that I love that you tied the two together, is that to lean in, that let go and allow them to explore the world, give loosen the leash, let them figure things out, but also lean into their
Mhm.
experiences. And I think that I say this to my kids all the time, and they're young and they love this analogy. I wonder if it'll work for teens, but I always tell my kids that dogs equal barking, cats equal meowing. What do humans equal? And they'll tell me mistakes. And that's, I want them to know so clearly that it is your job to make mistakes. Not just make mistakes, but especially in my home with my guidance, with my leaning in, you are expected to make mistakes. I just had my son do something that he wasn't supposed to do just the other day, and he knows he's not supposed to do it, but he did something. And he came to me and he felt so horrible. And I'm in that one initial moment, I was a little triggered, like, come on, like I've told you this like many times. Your father's told you, you know that you're expecting, that you're expected not to do something like this, and you're still doing it. And just in that moment, I saw him and his emotions, and I found myself, and this gets easier and easier over time, but falling into
Mhm.
compassion, falling into feelings, that feeling state that he may not understand why he did it, but I understand that he's supposed to do it sometimes and that it's going to be triggering, but that he's allowed to do that in my home. And the same goes with our teens, is that they're supposed to make mistakes, because it's through mistakes that we have the human experience, that we learn and we grow into humans. But now, to all the mamas listening, wouldn't we want our children making all of the mistakes in our home, with our safety, with under the roof over our head, with our ability to support them through it and to educate them? So much of parenting is education. They may not know how to maneuver through situations, so we're here to
Mhm.
teach them. And to be able to do that so that when they are out on their own, they know what that mistake equals. They know what they can learn from that. They can be independent. And when they do make a mistake, most importantly, Ashley, is that they're not hard on
Yes.
themselves, that they know what it's like to let go, but lean into
Mhm.
themselves. And I think that's the most important thing, because at the end of the day, we're not going to be parents forever. Yes, we're parents and we're going to be more friendly parents. We're going to become more from friendly parents to friends as we grow up. We're all going to be living in this world as adults together. But in order for us to do that, we have to know what it looks like for them to be able to learn and to flourish and fly their wings and live on their own, and also come into that let go and lean in throughout the entire journey. So I love that you
And
mentioned that.
I love how you just mentioned, I don't want to say normalizing, I guess, mistakes essentially, because we all make them. And I feel like as teens, there is this enormous pressure, not just from the home environment, but from culture. You have to be a certain way, succeed in a certain way, or success looks a certain way. You have to get good grades. You have to be the star athlete. You have to do all of these things. And it really leaves
Yeah.
no room for mistakes. And all too often, because of the messaging, primarily that culture puts out, and or us parents ultimately feel, so we unconsciously put it onto our kids, is that if you make like, there is no room for error. And a lot of the times when there is mistakes made, teens um, personalizes, I'm not good enough. I need to be better. I need to do better. But normalizing that you are human, it is going to happen, takes that pressure off. And I really feel like it helps them find their way, essentially, because reflecting in my own life, it's through all of my mistakes that I've learned more about who I am, more about what I am capable of,
Mhm.
right? It really has helped me navigate life and navigate who I am. So it's like mistakes should almost be praised. And there's Christina, oh my gosh, she spoke at Evolve. What's Christina Kuz?
Kuzak.
Yes.
Christina Kuzak, I
Yes.
think.
And
Yeah.
she actually did this post a little while ago, but I think it was like her daughter got bad grades or something like that, and she was like, congratulations, I am so happy, now you can this wasn't exactly what she said, but essentially it was like, cool, now you can like learn from this and move forward in a healthy way and take the lessons from it, rather than like, oh my God, how could you get a bad grade? So thank you for bringing the mistakes up, because I mean, if I'm honest, I think all of us adults need to hear it too. We're going to make mistakes in parenting, and it's not a reflection of who you are.
You're absolutely right. And I'm so glad you brought that up because, especially in education and academics, Ashley, you're probably getting way more of this in your real time life right now than even I am with the toddlers. But even when my kids come home with the test grade and they've gotten 0 things wrong, I'm like, why didn't you make any mistakes? What happened here? And I almost feel like sometimes I'll slip that in there to almost give the opposite spectrum of what they are receiving in the rest of the world,
Mm-hmm.
because they're still being encouraged that, oh, you should have gotten this right, or next time try this. And the thing is that they're doing the best that they can. If our children are in an area where they need extra support, absolutely that grade can be reflective of where there's room for improvement. But at the end of the day, there is no number in the world, whether it's our IQ, our weight on the scale, the number, the grades on our papers. There's absolutely zero, the numbers in our bank accounts. There's no number that can possibly be a significant, worthwhile definition of who we are. And so teaching that to our kids early on is so, so essential. And I can't imagine how much the teens must be experiencing this. I mean, I've heard just from family, friends, and things, just the pressure that it takes to get into a school, to a college these days, just seems rampant. And so that pressure is undeniably great. And for us to come in as parents and kind of unnarrate that for them and tell them that, no, it's okay for you to make a mistake. You are going to be just exactly who it is that you are, and you'll find a way to get there, and that these numbers don't define you. But having said that, is there any support that you need in this area, or is it just not like your
Yeah.
thing? Some subjects are not going to be our kids' subjects. That's okay. That doesn't mean that they're not learning about it, but certainly nobody's a subject matter about everything. They don't need to be either.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was so amazing that you touched on that, because that really goes back to just seeing the child in front of you for who it is that they are. And some kids, traditional school, like their mind just doesn't work. Like working in a math book and doing worksheets, right? And that's okay. It's like you got, sometimes if that's the only option, then you play the game, but really, like you were saying, not to, really creating the messaging and the environment for them to not be for their worth not to be attached to that letter grade or that percentage, or any number. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
And yes, the teen years is a whole other level with the pressure for grades. And it's really sad. I mean, yes, that is how our world works, right? Like you go to school, you graduate, and then what from there? But to shed light that there's not one pathway for everybody. There's multiple pathways, and it doesn't matter what path you take. Ultimately, the path that is best for you, like you will be on, and it's okay if it looks different than somebody else's. But I love how you touched on all of that, because it really goes back to one of those core needs, and just seeing your child for who it is that they are in front of you, and coming alongside that child, and not the one that you think that they should be. There,
Absolutely.
it reminds me. Have you ever heard of this book, Hold On to Your Kids?
Was that
Yes.
Gabor's
So
book?
it was written by Gabor Mate
Yes.
and his psychologist. Actually, they co-wrote it together. Have you read it or no?
I haven't, but I've heard of it and it's on my docket.
It is okay. Clearly, if you're watching this on YouTube, you could see that my dog got the back of it. But it's like the Conscious Parent or the Awakened Family, or any of Dr. Shefali's books for that matter. Like, it's one of those books that you reread and you get, I know you kind of touched based on it, like when you read The Conscious Parent, you read it from two different perspectives. This is also one of those books, like every time you read it, you're going to get something different from it, because you're going to be a different parent. But it's a phenomenal book going into the teen years, I would even say. And in the teen years, it's why parents need to matter more than peers. And I wanted to read this quote from here because it really goes in line with what we are talking about. And it's, our focus is not on what parents should do, but on who they need to be for their children. And I feel like that goes right along in line with what we're saying, like seeing your child for who it is that they are. Because when you see your child for who it is that they are, you know how to show up for them as a parent that they need, not the parent you think that they need.
100%. No, I love that quote. I love that book. I mean, I've heard that book referenced so many times, so it's on my list, but I love that that's a great resource for especially any of the moms
Hmm.
listening, for the teen
Hmm.
moms. Like you're mentioning, it's something that's benefited you to add it to your reading list because when you're going into the teen years, I feel like a lot of parents are
Hmm.
confused, am I
Yes.
right? Like, your child just immediately drastically changes. It's like a course, if you will, a little mini
Hmm.
training as far as what to expect with teenage children and how you can show up for
Hmm.
them. Because we had to learn what it was like to parent an infant. We learned that we had to learn what it was like to then parent a toddler because all of a sudden they became possessed and they were no longer these sweet little innocent babies who
Yeah.
cuddled in our arms. And same thing similar to teens is that we need a handbook.
Yes.
And I think that there's this notion that parenting is so absolutely, absolutely, it is intuitive, but it's that something that we don't need to be taught.
Yes.
It's something that we should just know how to do. But in the should, we're ending up not knowing what it is that we can do, how we can show up.
Mhm.
And so, resources like this, whether it be listening to a podcast, whether it may be reading a book, whatever we can get our hands on, is a way in to understanding what it can be like for me to show up for my child. And to reiterate what you said, the child in front of you, not the child that we dreamt of, not the one we sketched out on the sketchbook even before they were born, that my child will have this quality and they will be like this. Because while our minds may create one child, our soul has already attracted the child that we truly need. And so the more and more we come in touch with that, we start to see them for who it is they are. And this sounds so silly to say. I remember saying this to my very, very first client. She had mentioned that she struggles with her older son and that she's never said this out loud, but she's like, I don't like him. And I'm like, I get
Mhm.
it. And she's like, am I allowed to say that? I'm like, you're allowed to say that. And by the end of that time, she fell in love with her child. And I think that have this notion that we just love our children, but we can love the people in our life, but we can continuously fall in love with them again and again. That holds true in romantic relationships and marriages and parent child relationships. And so, to your point, the child in front of you, when you begin to see the child in front of you for who it is they are, you have the luxury of falling in love all over
Mhm.
again, falling in love with who it is they are. And that happens when you're falling in love with yourself
Yes.
simultaneously by accepting the as is, that I am who it is that I am in this moment. This situation is how it is in this moment. And the more and more I come around to accepting in acceptance, the more and more I can be in ease in it and I can enjoy the flow of life as opposed to the hesitancy of accepting what life has to offer.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's so amazing because you touched on a huge point. When you start to accept and love yourself, you're able to do that for others because the voices in your head and how you talk to yourself, it becomes your new go to, and you actually start to do that with your children too and seeing them in a different light. And that's the one thing I love about conscious parenting. It really focuses on the parent and just the parent living consciously, because when the parent is able to shift in that way, parenting isn't easy, right? Like there are always going to be hard moments in parenting, but it becomes more natural. And I think all too often we're always looking for like a quick fix or, the right phrase or the right way to do things. But when the parent shifts to living more consciously, that all is innately in you. Not to say you, like I said, not to say you're never going to have hard moments, but you'll be able to navigate it without having to search for all the answers on the outside. Oh, I
100%.
love that. Okay, I'm going to read one more quote because it just reminded me of another quote that I wrote down from this book, and totally talks about that. Adults who ground their parenting in a solid relationship with the child parent intuitively. They do not have to resort to techniques or manuals, but act from understanding and empathy, which you talked about, and compassion. If we know how to be with our children and who to be for them, we need much less advice on what to do. And that's from the book Hold On to Your Kids Too. And it's just such a powerful quote because it's like, how empowering is that? Like, literally, if we shift and start living a more conscious life and become more connected to us, like, what the heck? Like, I don't need as much advice and intuitively I'll know what to do. Like, that is so freaking cool.
You're 100% right. And the way, like, even just as you said it, the way I envisioned it in my mind is to go from that point to the other point is a long, dark, cold
Yes.
tunnel.
Yes.
There is a tunnel, however that experience looks like. So as there is a tunnel and there's no way through, there's no way out. There's no easy way to get past it. You can't get past it, but to go through
Mhm.
it. And that comes with a lot of unlearning, if you will, a lot of unlearning of those beliefs that we have of what life is supposed to look like, what parenting is supposed to be, what our child should be expected of. And when we're releasing all of that, we're going through that tunnel for parenting to be exactly what it was naturally created to be, which
Yes.
is intuitive.
Yeah.
And the way one mother parents will be completely different than another parents because each of our children are different. So there is no one cookie cutter way, but absolutely taking in these pieces of wisdom and information and exposing ourselves and our minds and our souls to this wisdom is a way to go through that tunnel to then come out of the other side, having that wisdom now being incorporated within you and you sharing that with your child, you kind of knowing, because now it's an energetic connection. We're going to go from the mind to energy. It takes that learning curve. But once we're in that energetic place, like you said, we're going to have hard moments. And I think that that's so key because, Ashley, my language used to be parenting is hard to, the toddler years are hard to motherhood is hard to now I had a hard moment.
Mhm.
And I think that that's so key because when we can't identify our experience, we kind of generalize it as
Right.
well. And so identifying that we're going to have those hard moments and it's just now having the tools and the energy and the spirit to be able to navigate it. So
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, I love that so much. I am so honored and so grateful that you were able to sit with us today. You are just so wise and such a light and just so knowledgeable. So thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with us today. I love at the end of every episode to ask the guests two questions. So I'm going to ask you two questions. The first one is looking back on your young mother self. So looking back on you as a young mom, what would you tell her?
What would I tell her? I think I would tell her to do what my kids did. And what my kids did the most was ask the question, why?
Mm,
And I think that I would want to do that going back as a young mom. I would just want to ask myself why, an unpressure filled question. But if I was feeling a certain way, to say,
mm,
why? Why are you feeling that way? Or why are you feeling this situation to be this? Or why is his or her crying bothering you? Just why? A very gentle inquiry. But the question would be to just ask myself why. And I think that would have been, and eventually was, my ticket into what consciousness looked like was just through the power of the question
oh,
why.
that is so good. Oh my gosh. You might, if you're listening to this, you might want to rewind or go back 30 seconds and re-listen to that. That is so powerful. So powerful. And just going back to what you said in the beginning, when you were kind of introducing yourself a little bit, you had so many questions in your head. And so I love that you said that because there's so much healing and growth and peace when we ask why, getting to the root and finding the answers. That is so amazing. Okay, last question. What is one thing that you would want to leave the Raising Mothers listener with? Could be anything.
Oh, okay. I'm picturing just a mama. And if I was talking to another mama, I would just say to
Mm,
feel. I think that we unknowingly don't feel a lot of our life and a lot of our experiences just in general or as a mom. I would say just feel your feelings in life and to just make sense of them. But it's so important that I think we end up making our lives more difficult trying to
Mhm.
not feel the feelings, and we end up making our situations harder than it is. But there are so many, there's like a death to the self that we have to in order to become a mother in the first place. So feel all of the feelings. When we're having a hard day with our kids, feel what that feels
Mhm.
like, because that's what life is here to offer us. When we're having these beautiful moments and we're seeing our kids talking to each other or they're playing together, feel what that bliss feels like. Feel what it feels like to feel both of those things at once, because that is the journey of life, is to feel our feelings and then make sense of them. And I think that when we become less and less scared of feeling our feelings, we become more and more zestful and life becomes more colorful. And not all colors are going to be the bright ones on the rainbow. That doesn't mean they're not worth feeling. So to any new mom or seasoned mom or toddler mom or teen mom, I would say to just feel, to not be afraid to feel the feelings, and to just know that they're here to give us a
Oh,
message.
I love that. And it reminds me of a story you shared the other day when you were having a conversation with your son and you encouraged him to name that feeling. And even as adults, that is such an amazing exercise to do, because then we don't personalize it and we don't take on that feeling as a part of who we are, but see it as something separate from us that we are just experiencing in that season. So I love how you brought that up. Just feel, because all too often as moms, we feel bad, we feel guilty, we feel like we're not good enough as a mom. But just sit in it and feel what that feels like, knowing that it's not defining you as a mom. It's just a feeling you're experiencing. Oh, Manzi, that's so good, so good. Well, I know all of our Raising Mothers listeners are going to love and adore you just as much as I do. And so in the show notes, I will put where they can connect with you more, and where they can find you. But thank you so much, so much for being on here with us today.
Yes. No, thank you for having me. If for anyone that's had the privilege of working with Ashley or have listened to her podcast, given the privilege that I've had to meeting her in person, she's as much of a gem in person as she is on screen, and so tied to who she is everywhere she goes. And you are such a light, and I'm so grateful to have had this conversation with you. Keep doing all the good things,
Thank
Ashley.
you. Thank you so much for your kind words. All right, guys, we'll talk to you later. I'm literally so excited that you took the time to hang out with me here in this space, and I would absolutely love to connect with you more. You can find me on Instagram or visit my website at ashleycahn.co. That's ASHLEYKAHN.co. I'll see you there.